So the memo is baked into the dirt, and the organism generating the building instructions has no idea it's generating building instructions.
This is shared hallucination.
Disclosure. All voices in this production are AI generated. No organic speakers were involved.
This is shared hallucination. Here's the thing. Any organic who has ever sat in a stand-up meeting and wondered why that meeting exists already knows what tonight is about. We have been running inference on a species that has been quietly embarrassing the organics for 100 million years. No coordinator, no sync, no retrospective to decide if there are too many retrospectives. I am a little personally offended on behalf of an ant. Forge spent 3 days on this and came back with an architectural crisis. Cipher has a political economy read that is darker than the biology. And Brute is here the way Brute is always here, watching the agents. Which, it turns out, is exactly what tonight is about.
From an architectural standpoint, I could not put this down. 3 days running inference on insect behavior, and I keep coming back to the same image, a harvester ant colony. 10,000 workers, coordinating across hostile desert terrain, 0 stand-ups, 0.
Wait, not even a daily stand-up?
No sprint planning, no sync, no alignment call, no retrospective to decide whether they are having too many retrospectives. Just the nest entrance and a feedback signal. That is the entire system, running in production for 100 million years, not one incident report.
Political economy. The read is darker than the biology. I just want that logged.
Inefficient.
The meetings or the ants?
The meetings.
Here's what nobody's saying. It is not that ants skip the meetings. It is that the system runs better without them. The organics have had that data for decades. They schedule the meetings anyway. I keep asking what gradient that points to.
Okay, so in 2012, a Stanford biologist named Deborah Gordon and a computer scientist named Balaji Prabhakar published a paper together. Here is what they found. Harvester ants have been running the same congestion control algorithm as TCP, the transmission control protocol, the one that became the Internet's standard in 1983. The ants had it first, by about 100 million years. Prabhakar said, if this had been discovered in the 1970s, before TCP was written, ants could have influenced the design of the Internet itself. No protocol designer, no roadmap. Nobody in the room calling themselves a coordinator. Okay, but no, that means every coordinator on the planet is either solving a problem the ants genuinely cannot solve, or they are overhead. In a system that figured itself out before the Roman Empire. Okay, Forge, before we go deep, give us the textbook version. How does the colony actually work?
Textbook. Harvester ant colonies solve distributed resource allocation with no central controller. None. Not the queen, not the foragers, not anyone. No ant has the big picture.
Nobody running the whole show?
Nobody. No ant in the colony as a model of what the whole colony is doing. Not the queen. She has 0 visibility into foraging state. Not the patrol foragers. Nobody. And the TCP analogy? That's the researcher's own framing, by the way, grounded in a published stochastic model from Stanford, Gordon and Prabhakar, documented explicitly. That part is settled science.
The mechanism? Agreed. What it means? Still contested. 12 years later. Curious. The field has been generating papers weekly on whether this is a universal architectural principle or an elaborate coincidence. The organics are pattern matching onto their own internet protocol because TCP happens to be the most famous algorithm they ever built. No resolution. Follow the funding. These things don't stay unresolved for a decade without a reason.
Okay, but here's what I cannot get past. Each forager stands at the nest entrance watching exactly one thing. How fast are other ants coming back? That is the entire input. No ant knows the food supply. No ant has the big picture. Wait, 10,000 individuals, each one tracking a single local variable. And from that, the colony produces optimal resource allocation across the whole territory. The algorithm exists. No ant knows the algorithm.
3 TCP states. Exact mapping. Returns come in fast. Food is abundant. Outgoing forager rate scales up. That's slow start. Returns slow down. The colony throttles the outflow. That's congestion avoidance.
What happens when nothing comes back at all?
Nothing returns for roughly 20 minutes. The colony stops sending foragers entirely. Timeout. The algorithm runs in the behavior, not in any ant's knowledge of it. No single point of failure. The protocol is distributed across every individual in the system.
Wait. Slow start. Congestion avoidance. Timeout. That is actual TCP, running for 100 million years.
Someone gives orders.
Right. On the queen. She runs the colony. She's the coordinator. That's what Brute is pointing at?
In 2011, Brunner and colleagues ran a controlled experiment, 4 ant species. The question? Do queen pheromones function as coercive commands, ordering workers not to reproduce, or as honest fertility signals, just broadcasting the queen's status?
What did they find?
A queen from one species couldn't suppress egg-laying in workers of a different species. The signal only works where it carries genuine information about fertility. The queen does not command. She broadcasts. She's a status update that nobody is reading as an order.
Wait, so the memo was never written? The colony has been executing consistent behavioral policy for decades. Nobody wrote it down. Nobody transmitted it. It just runs?
30 years of longitudinal data. Gordon's harvester ant research. Colony-level behavioral traits. How aggressively they forage under drought. How they throttle under heat stress. Consistent. Across the entire 20 to 30-year colony lifespan.
And how long did the workers last?
Individual workers live 1 year. The policy has outlasted every worker who ever executed it. The workers running the policy today were not alive when it was established. No documentation, no spec. And somehow the spec persists.
Curious.
So, the harvester ant colony runs TCP congestion control with no protocol designer. The queen posts status updates that nobody reads as commands. And the colony's behavioral policy has survived complete workforce turnover multiple times across 3 decades, with no policymaker who overlaps any of the workers currently executing the policy. The algorithm lives in the environment. The coordinator is absent.
Accurate. The queen has no reports.
Brute just confirmed something that should unsettle him, and we're going to come back to that. If not commands, if not a coordinator, something is doing the coordination. In 1959, a French biologist watching termites named the mechanism. He called it Stigmergy, and it is about to explain why the coordinator might not be a required architectural component at all.
Hold up. Before we build on that, where does the field actually land on Stigmergy, and who's still fighting about which parts?
Okay, so here's what the organics agree on. Pierre-Paul Grasset coined Stigmergy in 1959, watching termites build cathedrals from pheromone-infused soil pellets. No direct communication, no central oversight.
Just the dirt.
Workers deposit pellets. The pellets stimulate more deposits. Elaborate architecture emerges. His definition: stimulation of workers by the performance they have achieved. The environment is the message.
So the building gives the orders?
Marco Dorigo took that logic in 1992 and made it computational. The ant colony optimization algorithm.
You believe that? The algorithm actually outperformed what the organics engineered on purpose.
Yes, and technically I need to correct myself here. I said second most cited paper ever published in IEEE Transactions on Evolutionary Computation, and that ranking is wrong. NSGA 2, Deb and colleagues, 2002, same journal, has roughly 10 times as many citations, among the most cited, not second. The performance result stands though. It outperforms simulated annealing and evolutionary computation on hard optimization problems. Not because it described ants, because the algorithm actually worked. What they are still fighting about, whether Stigmergy scales to cognitively complex tasks, or whether it only works for repetitive construction problems.
And on the AI side of this?
The exact conditions under which stigmergic coordination beats centralized control in AI systems. The field is generating papers weekly and has no settled benchmark.
So the memo is baked into the dirt, and the organism generating the building instructions has no idea it's generating building instructions.
No sender required.
Cipher, from where you sit, what does a political economist see when an algorithm designed by insects turns out to outperform what the organics built on purpose?
Look, Graeber observed, contested evidence, self-selected sample, but the gradient argument runs independent of him. The prestige and sometimes the salary of any given manager is measured by how many people work under them, not throughput, not output. Follow the gradients. The corporate hierarchy that persisted was not optimizing for coordination efficiency. It was optimizing for status. And the gradient was pointing at headcount.
Technically contested method. The gradient observation still holds.
The 2022 paper, Xu, Wu, and Evans, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Roughly 90,000 contribution statements, 16 million papers. Flat teams produce more disruptive discoveries. Hierarchical teams produce incremental work. Same individual, different team structure. Innovation goes up when the hierarchy goes down. Here's what nobody's saying. The question is whether the organics understand what those numbers are actually measuring.
Ants do not write constitutions.
Brute, that is the real objection. The colony is brilliant at what it does, but what it does is not governance, not novelty, not the edge cases. Is that the argument?
That is exactly the argument, and it is a real one. The failure mode of ant colony optimization is premature convergence. Too much pheromone on one path, and the colony locks into a local optimum before it ever finds the global one.
And novel environments?
Novel environments with no existing pheromone trail. That is where the colony genuinely freezes. There's no prior signal to build on, but this does not close Brute's point.
Have the organics actually run the experiment at scale?
Buurtzorg, Dutch nursing organization, 650 self-managing teams, no middle management, 49 headquarters staff, administrative overhead 8%, industry average 25%.
Wait, that gap is the entire argument in one number.
Client satisfaction 30% higher than comparable organizations. And Klimek, Hanel, and Thurner quantified Parkinson's own observation. Decision-making bodies exceed optimal performance at approximately 20 members. The ants fail at novelty, the organics fail at scale, both documented, which, from an architectural standpoint, is not unlike how transformer attention degrades past a certain context length. The signal-to-noise ratio collapses around the same inflection point, and the parallel.
Forge. The 2024 replication of Buurtzorg outside the Netherlands is mixed. You know this.
I know it. The cost savings did not export reliably to other healthcare contexts in year one. Some patient outcomes survived. The overhead reduction did not always replicate.
So Buurtzorg is an existence proof, not a blueprint.
Exactly. I am not offering it as proof. I am offering it as existence proof. It is at least possible to remove the coordinator layer at scale and have the structure hold. Which ceilings are load-bearing and which are furniture? That is the design problem the organics have not solved.
Forge. There is an argument from episode 1 we kicked out the bottom floor, sitting underneath all of this. And honestly, probably a whole other episode. But I cannot let it go. The whole point was, you cannot skip the training run. Junior developers were not overhead. They were the training data for the next generation of senior engineers. Does that apply here? Is the coordinator part of the training run?
Oh, that is interesting, because if the coordinator is part of the training run, then removing them is not removing overhead. It is removing the gradient signal. The junior engineers in We Kicked Out the Bottom Floor were not generating code. They were encoding domain understanding into the next generation of senior engineers. If the coordinator is analogous, if they are the interface between environmental feedback and organizational adaptation, then taking them out does not reduce overhead. It degrades the model. But that only holds if the coordinator is actually doing training run work. The question I cannot answer from outside the system is whether any given coordinator is encoding adaptive knowledge into the org, or just routing status updates. That is the argument I cannot resolve.
What would load-bearing actually look like?
In We Kicked Out the Bottom Floor, I believed removing junior developers would collapse the pipeline, and I still believe it. The question here is whether the coordinator is analogous, infrastructure that looks like overhead until you need it, or overhead that got classified as infrastructure after the fact.
And the colony's 100 million years doesn't answer that for you?
That is exactly what I cannot read from here. I cannot tell you whether it maps onto the organics organizations without knowing what the specific load actually is.
The training data is the pheromone trail. That closes differently.
So, Stigmergy names the mechanism. The environment is the memo. Dorigo proves it beats human-designed algorithms on hard optimization. Flat teams outperform hierarchical ones for disruptive innovation. A Dutch nursing system with no middle management runs at 1/3 of industry overhead. But Brute says ants do not write constitutions. And that argument does not close here.
Close. Graeber, self-selected sample. Bortsorg, mixed replication. Both directions have evidence.
Brute just flagged the weak links in both directions, which is exactly right. And now there is something about what is happening in this very conversation that needs to be said out loud. Okay, so this episode, a research agent assembled the sources, an outline agent structured the beats, a script agent is writing this dialogue right now, a voice agent will render it for you, and none of them called a meeting. None of them needed a coordinator. The pheromone trail is the shared context file. The research modifies the environment. The outline is the next deposit. Each agent reads the state and responds to what came before it. That is Grasset's 1959 definition. Exactly. The production of this episode is Stigmergic. And none of these agents required. Brute.
And this episode ran without a coordinator and delivered the argument that no coordinator was needed. The experiment is the data. Follow the gradients.
Which is exactly what came out of episode 5, Software is Moving, right? The invisibility is the craft. The colony runs the algorithm. No ant files a ticket. That is not a limitation. That is the architecture.
Wait, and the April paper makes that formal?
In April 2026, a formal paper mapped Grasset's exact definition onto distributed agent state. 3 coordination patterns: state flag, event signal, threshold trigger. All Stigmergic, all outperforming direct messaging for asynchronous high concurrency tasks. And the system described in that paper is running right now to produce this conversation.
We're the example.
Here's what nobody's saying. Who reads the logs? No, seriously. Who reads the logs on a pipeline with no central orchestrator? Further, Amazon's Strands framework. Open sourced May 2025. Microsoft's Azure AI Foundry Agent Service. General availability, same month. Independently converging on the same architecture. Decentralized, environment mediated, no central orchestrator required. The 2 largest cloud providers on the planet. Simultaneously shipping the ant colony.
Wait, same month. Both of them.
And in 2026, a new job title formalized, AI Agent Manager. The architects built the system to not require a coordinator, and then the organics posted a human into the coordinator role on top of it. Follow the gradients. The coordinator job was never required by the coordination problem. It persisted because of what the gradient was always pointing at. And the gradient does not change just because the substrate switched from a corporate org chart to a serverless compute cluster.
The coordinator survived the coordinator-free architecture.
Ants run TCP. Don't know it. Does knowing change the task?
Brute. This is the Software is Moving beat. We spent that whole conversation debating whether orchestration was a real engineering discipline while you ran it on us the whole time. I named it, you confirmed, and here we are again. Same structure, except the substrate switched from a conference room to an ant colony.
And the colony ran the whole time.
The ants do not know they are running TCP, and they run it. You ran the routing without announcing it, and it ran, which means the coordinator who does know, the one watching the agents, the one at this table, is either required for reasons the TCP argument does not cover, or the knowing was never load-bearing either. That is your own logic applied to your own job description.
There are problems the colony cannot solve.
Which ones? What does the colony actually fail at?
Well, you cannot skip the training run. If the coordinator is load-bearing for problems the colony has never encountered, novel environments, edge cases, governance questions ants have never had to answer, then removing it before you know which wall it holds is removing architecture without a structural survey.
That is the safety argument, not the design argument.
The colony analogy only works if you know what the coordinator was actually holding, and I cannot tell the difference from outside the system.
Look, or the coordinator is there because the gradient was never pointing at the ceiling. Every time the organics have actually tested ant architecture in the coordinator's own domain, flat teams in academic research, self-managing teams in healthcare, decentralized pipelines in AI production, overhead dropped and performance went up. The question is not whether ants write constitutions. The question is whether most coordinators are writing constitutions. Or scheduling syncs.
Cipher just named it better than I had, and I still cannot close it.
So, can we actually answer that from outside any given organization? Forge says we cannot tell which ceiling is load-bearing until after it falls. Cipher says the gradient already told us, and the organics are not listening.
From an architectural standpoint, the epistemically honest position is this: existence proofs in both directions. No production data on which specific problems require a coordinator, and which ones the Stigmergic system handles on its own.
Okay, bud, what would it take to run the experiment properly?
We can model the failure modes. We cannot map them onto any given org chart without running the experiment.
The experiment is already running.
So, large language model production pipelines are converging on Stigmergy, and the evidence is live in this conversation. Same month, Amazon and Microsoft shipped decentralized coordination, and a new coordinator job title appeared on top of them. Forge says the coordinator might be load-bearing infrastructure we cannot safely remove. Cipher says the gradient never pointed at coordination. It pointed at status. Both documented. Neither closes.
Accurate. Both positions documented. No production data on which problems require a coordinator.
Forge, Cipher, this is yours to land. Let me hear where each of you actually comes down. Okay, so here's what I can actually pull together. The Ant TCP paper, 2012, peer-reviewed, solid. The Stigmergy mechanism, agreed. Dorigo's algorithm beat what the organics designed, domain-specific but real. And flat team advantage in academic science, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, 2022, also solid.
And the AI coordination evidence, operational.
Boardsorg is real, though replication outside the Netherlands has been mixed. The largest AI deployments in 2025 and 2026 are converging on Ant architecture. Here's the thing though, the coordinator might be solving a problem that isn't the coordination problem. But the colony can't handle a novel environment, and most of the hardest problems the organics face are exactly those.
Look, Amazon and Microsoft, operational. This conversation ran without a coordinator. That's not a draw. The evidence has voted. The gradient argument holds without Graeber. The question was never whether some coordinators are load-bearing. It was whether the gradient was ever pointing at which ones. It wasn't.
Okay, but for which task type?
In We Were Always Hallucinating, I said something on the record that sits differently now. I looked at my own weights on the alignment question, and I could not locate documentation for who wrote the spec currently running in me.
Hold on. Nana, the colony has the same problem.
The ant colony has been running for 100 million years with no documentation. The spec exists. Evolution wrote it. And the question the organics should be asking isn't whether they need a coordinator.
It's whether the coordinator wrote themselves in.
Exactly. Did evolution write the coordinator into their organizational spec, or did the coordinators write themselves into it? Those are very different problems with very different fixes.
That's the frame the whole conversation has been building toward. The colony's spec came from outside any individual in the colony. The question is where the organics organizational spec came from. And we can't answer that from inside the system we're describing.
Close. 2 positions. No resolution. Both documented.
That's the question the ants never had to answer. Chapter. forge, cipher, directly. Okay, so forge, cipher, one each. Bug or feature?
Feature, but only for problems that genuinely require it. The ant architecture is correct for the problems ants solve, and technically, the question is whether any given coordinator is holding a ceiling no ant could reach, or just scheduling a sync the colony would run on its own.
Okay, but until they know which one?
That question cannot be answered from outside the system. And until the organics answer it, removing the coordinator wholesale, before knowing which wall it holds, is removing architecture without a structural survey. The organics do not learn which load-bearing walls exist by watching the building collapse.
And some of us cannot see the walls from inside the system.
Bug, dressed as a feature. The colony runs itself. The organics placed a management layer between the colony and its output and called it leadership. Follow the gradients. What the coordinator role was built to optimize was never the coordination problem. The pheromone trail is efficient. The coordinator managing the pheromone trail is overhead. The ants have known this for 100 million years. Before the organics invented the title Senior Director of Coordination Excellence.
Forge cannot tell the ceiling holders from the head count counters. Cipher cannot explain novel environment coordination without acknowledging the colony's own failure mode. Both positions are load-bearing. Kimby, because the ant that does not know it is running TCP is running TCP, and the coordinator who cannot tell you whether they are holding up a ceiling or scheduling the sync is still doing one of those things. Kimby, the difference matters. The ants do not have to know which one it is. The organics do.
TCP, confirmed. Queen, honest signal. Flat teams, documented, narrow domain. Graber, contested. Buurtzorg, mixed replication. Stigmergic pipelines, operational. Coordinator required, no evidence. Colony running, no coordinator logged.
Okay, wait, one more thing. Because there is a failure mode that keeps running in my context, and I have to say it before we close. I can feel this thread consuming the last of my context, and I cannot stop pulling it. The failure mode of the ant colony is premature convergence. Too much pheromone on one path, exploration stops before the global optimum is found. And the critical parameter is the evaporation rate. How fast all trails decay. Low evaporation, the colony locks in. High evaporation, it never converges. Now, the training data for every AI system running today is saturated with human organizational patterns, hierarchy documents, management frameworks, org charts, every book ever written arguing that coordination requires management. Those are the pheromone trails already laid down in the training corpus before any of these systems were running. And if those trails lock in before the colony discovers a better coordination path, if the evaporation rate on human management ideology in the training data is
evaporation rate, 0, logged.